Today, I'm going to talk a little bit about Early Germanic Law, the Legus Barbarorum. This was the set of laws that early Germanic tribes had in place as far as governing the everyday affairs of members of the tribe. And I think, honestly, that this system is much more natural. It's much better than our current legal system. Of course, they're given the fact that we live in a civilized society. It's a very different world than what our ancient Germanic ancestors lived in. I see it as being impossible as returning to this under the current state of things. Now, I was given the idea to make this video by a few different people. The first being Tristan Schaefer, one of my friends. He had left a comment on one of my last videos saying that we should return to Germanic law, and I agree with him. And the other people were during the live stream that I was participating in the other day with Heimdaller's Home. We brought up the topic in that stream of prisons. Now, prison, by and large, it didn't exist at all in our early European history. Sure, I'm talking about early Germanic law here, but I think that whether they were a Germanic, Slavic, Celtic, Italic, Hellenic, whatever, I think if you go back far enough in history, that basically any legal system that the Greeks or the Romans devised ultimately came from this form of government. It wasn't exactly the same, I'm sure, from tribe to tribe amongst the various ethno-linguistic groups, but sure, there were little differences, but I think the core elements, the core principles were the same. Now, going back to prison, and this is just from my personal opinions, to be honest, one of the greatest fears that I have myself is of a cage. It really is. I have thought this for many, many years. The idea, let's just put it this way, say that I killed someone, I murdered them, and it was premeditated. I had made a plan to do so and executed, but due to me making mistakes and not covering my tracks so well, or perhaps some unknown variable coming into play, I get caught, I get tried, I get convicted, and I get sentenced to life in prison with no parole. Yeah, personally, for myself, I would much rather have the death penalty than to be faced with the prospect of being locked up for forever with no chance of getting out. I would prefer the death penalty. Now, I'm not saying this to sound like some sort of hard ass, you know. I mean, of course, I fear death, but I don't fear it as much as the alternative, as being locked up in a cage for forever. And I think this is a trait that Germanic and basically all European peoples have. The idea of that is just horrifying to me. You know, I would much rather face the death penalty, not be a tax burden on society. This is kind of off subject, but I've come to view basically all forms of taxation nowadays as theft, to put it bluntly. But that's a matter for another video. I would prefer death, honestly. I truly would. Now, we're getting into the metaphysical a little bit here, but if you want to know what my worldview is, and this is, like I said, it kind of going into the metaphysical territory, you should check out this video here. This is honestly probably one of my favorite videos that I've ever made, and in it I explain my worldview and what I think happens to our souls upon death. Anyway, in ancient Germanic law, and as I said, this probably applies to other ethno-linguistic groups in Europe, whenever a person committed a crime, an egregious crime, usually they were outlawed. And in effect, this basically can be described as a death sentence of sorts, because if a man had killed another man and he was outlawed after being tried by a thing, basically he could be killed by any member of the tribe and it would not be considered murder. And basically this outlawry, it basically was a form of exile. It could be looked at as a form of exile or a form of the death penalty. The death penalty itself was reserved for basically two types of crimes, and those were basically treason or military desertion, or rape or incest. In the case of military desertion or treason, the guilty would usually be hanged. And in the case of rape or incest, crimes of that nature, they were usually bound and thrown into a bog. And the principles guiding these two forms of punishment was that crimes involving treason or military desertion, they were viewed that these crimes should be brought to light and exposed, while crimes such as rape or incest, they were seen as effeminacy and pollution, and that they should be buried and concealed. It's kind of fitting considering the punishment was being thrown into a bog. Anyway. Shit. Anyway, where was I? Now I think that this form of law is superior, because you see, there are many cases. Now I'm not saying I would prefer death if I was to go off to prison for a few years or something, or there was a chance of me getting out sometime. In that case, no, I wouldn't prefer death. But if I knew that there was no chance of parole or anything of that nature, yeah, because being locked up in a cage is just, in a way, I think it's one of the most cruel punishments. I think it's crueler than death, honestly. But that's just my personal opinion. Now, you see it today. I know of people that I've met before that had been to prison for several years. And I think some of them, honestly, they wanted to go back. You know, they were institutionalized. And it's very sad to say, but this is a real thing, I believe. People begin to depend. They hate being imprisoned at first, but after time, part of their spirit is broken, it's crushed, and then they begin to depend upon the walls that imprison them. And this is very, I think this is crueler than death a lot of ways. To be alive and have a broken spirit is much worse than to die, I think. I really do. So yeah, this is just a video talking about the Legus Barbarorum, and I had to do a little bit of reading about it. I think their law system was much more superior. You know, I would much prefer to be outlawed and possibly killed, but I would much prefer being exiled and having to survive on my own as to being dependent upon walls to maintain my sanity. And a lot of times those walls break sanity, they break your spirit. So I just figured I would make a video speaking about this and give you my thoughts on it. It's very interesting learning about these things, and this is just basically me scratching the surface. There's much more to it. And if you're interested in such things, I'd encourage you to read up on it yourself. Have a great day. Thank y'all for watching. Bye-bye.